What do you wish you had in high school that kids have today? My son is in his high school's robotics team. They have tons of tools to build robots to compete, including a big machine that cuts sheets of metal based on what digital file you send it. I'd have loved to have had that. When I was in high school, the most advanced tool I had access to was a dot matrix printer. I wowed my classmates with my complex report covers made with word art and highly pixelated graphics. Programming classes. I seem to have just missed that after I graduated. I went to the same high school as my dad. He did a programming class back in the 70s, from 2000 until a few years ago all the IT was pretty much about using MS Office, Word, Excel etc. They started teaching programming again a few years ago. I just find it funny how they stopped for so long. I'm doing a degree in CS, so it would have been nice to have been introduced to it much sooner. I find it really interesting. Digital photography. I have so few pictures of friends and good times we had during high school because no one carried around a camera and bothered to get film developed. Of the ones we did have, most are long gone with no negatives to get them reproduced. To all of the folks saying to be glad because there aren't that many pictures to come back and haunt you, when you're in your 50s you'll be amazed at just how few people give a crap about the stupid stuff you did in high school. We all did stupid stuff, no one is unique in that aspect, you just grow to realize it wasn't really all that stupid. I'm in college as an older person ATM, and honestly, I wish I had the social dynamics lol. I was eating lunch and I heard two guys talking to each other and he was showing his friend something on his phone and he was like, bro, she's beautiful, I can totally see you guys together. And it seemed to make the other guy really happy. I don't know if he was maybe feeling insecure about how he looks or whatever. But you could tell it meant a bit to him. It just seems less cliquey. Less every man for themselves. I'm sure there's plenty of assholes, obviously. But just generally kids seem really nice and smart these days. Probably cell phones. The ability to call or text an individual to find out where they are was a revolution but wasn't widespread until I was in college. Used to have to call their parents' house and hope they were there. The idea that once you left the house you were just in a communication black hole until you returned or actively called someone from a payphone is a big change from the modern day. You had to make plans the day or morning before. And then if anything happened to derail those plans then the whole thing was just a failure. Personally, having come from high school in the 90s when we did have the internet but it was more of a novelty, Wikipedia. Wikipedia is one of the greatest repositories of human knowledge and you can see the sources. It would have been amazing for it to have been built out to where it is now while I was in high school. Electricity. Username checks out. Bet he had to walk up both hills to get a bucket full of it every morning before class. I tell you kids, back in my day, we had it so rough. Or so much better, I can't tell anymore. Anyway, every day, we would wake up at 2 in the morning and go to the table for breakfast. We all lived in a closet, you see, so it was one room. And we would ask, me and my 64 brothers and 27 sisters, what's for breakfast, mum? She would smack us all with a shoe and say cold beans. And if we complained and said but we had cold beans yesterday, because we had cold beans every day, she would smack us all 5 times with a shoe and say tough, it's all we can afford. I'm trying to feed a family of 93 with just half a silver Buckington. A silver Buckington was about the same as half a penny back in the day. Then we would head to school. We met up with the Johnson kids from down the road, and walked the 1,674 miles to school. On the way to school we had to walk up a mountain so tall it extended to outer space. When we got to the top of the mountain, we would see the Peterson boys on their fancy bikes, which they don't make like they used to, and we would race them down the mountain. Then, when we got to school at 4 in the morning, the headmaster would come up to us and say, "You bloody kids are late." Then he would smack us all with the cane 10 times and tell us we had 7 years of detention. Then, we went to class, and Mr. Stevenson would say, "Okay, line up kids." Then he would spank us each 60 times, then hit us each with the cane 40 times each. Then it was 7 at night and we had to walk home. Then, when we got home, we'd ask, "What's for dinner, Mum?" And she'd smack us each 50 times with a pan and say, "Rotten cabbage." And if we complained, she would smack us each 100 times with a broom and say, "I'm trying to feed a family of 154 on just one eyelet sliver, just you wait until your dad gets home." Now an eyelet silver was worth about as much as a grain of sand. Then, when our dad got home from his job at the soot factory, he would hit us all 180 times with his belt. If we had been naughty, we would hit us all another 600 times. Then, at 1:58, Mum would say, "Okay, time for bed." Then, we got into our potato sacks, and she would hit us each with a shoe 8 times before we went to sleep. On Saturdays, we went down to Uncle Bob's farm to work. We would have to walk 345 miles to the bus stop, then catch the Route 4 bus for 56 stops. We would get on the bus and pay our fare of 3 Teddy Roses. Now a Teddy Rose is worth about the same as a flake of skin. Then, if the ticket inspector came to us, he would hit us all 4 times with his baton. If any of us had lost our ticket, we would hit us all 10 times again and throw us off the bus, and we had to walk the rest of the way. When we got to the farm, Uncle Bob would drive to the gate in his tractor, hit us all 780 times with his crowbar, and tell us to get in his trailer so he could drive us to the farmhouse. Then, we had to plow the fields with a toothbrush in the blazing summer heat. Now, they don't make summers like they used to, so it was about 1345.4 degrees Spencer, or 67 degrees centigrade using your newfangled metric system. Then, we would have to milk the cows. Now, they don't make cows like they used to, so each cow weighed about 459 hogsheads, or 3.2 tons in your newfangled metric system. If you touched a cow's udder, it would kick you and you would die, so you had to be really careful when you milked the cows. Then, when we were done, Uncle Bob would say, "Okay kids, time for your pocket money." He would give us each 9 copper Jemimas, which are worth about 1 political promise each, and beat us each 6 times with his tractor before we left. On Sundays, we would meet the Johnson boys and go down to the river. Now, they don't make rivers like they used to, so this river was about as wide as the whole of America, and as deep as the Marianas Trench, and it was filled with liquid tungsten. We would play by the old oak tree near the river, climbing on it and building tree houses and such. Now, they don't make trees like they used to, so this tree had a trunk as thick as a city, and was tall enough that the branches on the top could scrape the moon. One day, little Jimmy fell from the top of the tree. When he hit the ground, the only bit of his body we could recognize was his left eyeball. We picked up all his bits and rushed him to the doctor's surgery. Dr. James said, "Oh, it's just a scratch, little Jimmy, don't worry, pop a plaster on it and you'll be right," and he gave little Jimmy a plaster and a lollipop and he was okay. After we finished playing by the river, we would go into town and get some candy. Now, back in the day, you could give the shopkeeper 1 bronze winglet, which is worth about as much as a cigarette butt, and he would give you the entire stock of the store. So we would go and get our candy, and we'd go into the town square and eat it. Now, we didn't have any of your fancy food laws back in the day, so there was all kinds of stuff in our candy. Bleach, LSD, ecstasy, you name it. So we would always get a little hyper after our candy. One day, when we were hyper, we went up to Mr. Boris's car, the only car in the town, and touched it. As we touched it, we saw Dad storming down the street holding his belt. "You kids, having fun while I work all day in the soot factory just so you can have grilled water for tea every night, I ought to smack you all." We were sure he was going to smack us, but then he said, "No, I got a better idea, I'll take you to see Mr. Henderson, he'll set you right." Now, Dad had told us about Mr. Henderson. Mr. Henderson was a veteran from the Great War, where he got a really bad injury, but we never knew what it was. Dad walked us all down to the pub, and we saw a left testicle propped up on a peg leg. "Mr. Henderson," said Dad, "I have some kids here who need a good whooping." Then, Mr. Henderson picked up the entire pub, and hit us each 4,006 times with it. Then, Dad said, "Right, I gotta go back to the soot factory, you kids run on home now." By now it was 1 p.m., which meant it was curfew. While we were walking out of the town square, we heard a man shout, "Oi you bloody kids, it's curfew." We turned around and saw the constable holding his baton. He hit us each 160,265 times with his baton, then put us in jail for 60,123,865 years. Now, they don't make jails like they used to. This one had 5-mile-thick steel walls, and a single hole in the top let in some light. We were in there for about 13,526 years, until Mum baked the constable some cardboard pie so he would let us out. Then, she hit us all 1,292 times with a washboard, and grounded us for the rest of our lives. So don't you come complaining to me about nonsense like not being able to breathe or not being able to feel your legs. If you like the content, please consider subscribing, and don't forget to hit the like button.